Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Optimistic Entrepreneur podcast. Today I want to talk to you about content strategy, and in particular I want to share with you in detail how you can use your podcast to build an integrated multi-channel content strategy. And actually what I'm doing is I'm showing you exactly how I'm doing it. Now, podcasting has been one of my most effective channels of communication and marketing. It's astonishing. I've been at conferences and people have come up to me and said, "Oh yes, you're John Colley. I've heard your podcast." And that's really, that's really when it's, getting through. Now, my online learning podcast, which I actually haven't made new episodes for since 2017, but it's still up there, has to date over 940,000 downloads. So you can see what a fantastic outreach tool it has been. And that's one of the main reasons that I decided to start up the Optimistic Entrepreneur podcast, really because I wanted to expand the range of topics that I can cover and help you with rather than just online courses. But just podcasting on its own is not enough. It's amazing content, so you can actually use it to become the core of your content marketing strategy. And in this episode, I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. But as you can see, I don't start with an audio recording. I am actually recording this for the first time, and I'm doing it as a video recording. Now, you may well ask, why do I do that? Well, because it's much easier to create a video recording, particularly when I want to be on the screen, and then strip out the audio. But it's much more difficult to, if you create an audio recording, to go back and put back in video. So it's simply that this is the easiest place to start. You can do it, you can put back still images and things, but my recommendation would be to create the audio and take the video, to create the video and take the audio out of it. So you'll first have to start considering how you are going to prepare your content. And the key issue is here, are you going to script it, or are you going to basically talk to slides, which is what I'm doing here. Now, I have done videos where I've done scripts, and they can be very tight. And if you're dealing with something very complicated and very technical, it's probably a good way to go. But it is difficult without an autocue, and I don't find autocues very easy to handle. It's very difficult to actually do a headshot and be reading a script at the same time. So I prefer very much to talk to you just as I'm doing now. Of course, you can just wing it, but I don't recommend that either, because you'll end up with a rambling, unstructured piece of content, and I don't like something that's unstructured. Of course, this means that you'll need to have a clear idea about what you want to talk about before you start. But before you go any further, you need to think about the purpose of the content. And by that I mean, what call to action are you going to associate with the video content? And this means we need to go back and ensure that we have got some primary marketing goals established. And I'm going to talk about these for a couple of minutes because they're very important. You need to think about your marketing goals in terms of your funnel strategy. Now, at the top of the funnel, you have new leads and prospects. In the middle of the funnel, it's all about lead engagement. And then at the bottom of the funnel, it's lead conversion to customers. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you want to achieve, both in terms of your primary goals and, of course, in any particular piece of content? Now, I have two primary marketing goals. One is to grow my email list at the top. And secondly is to grow my 6-Minute Strategist membership site, which is at the bottom. Now, I also have some secondary marketing goals. The first of which is to promote my content, which is in the middle of the funnel, but it's also to promote my Udemy courses and my Fiverr gigs, which are at the bottom of the funnel. So you can see I've got a spread of objectives. There are 5 in total, 2 primary, 3 secondary, and they cover the top, the middle, and the bottom of the funnel. And this is what you need to be thinking about. Now, my content strategy is very much focused on the top of the funnel to attract organic traffic to my content and then into one of my funnels. Of course, I've created dozens of courses. I have Fiverr gigs to sell as well, so I want to make sure these get exposure too, but without being too pushy. For instance, I don't do paid ads. Now, going back to your objective, you need to then define the call to action for the episode. And the primary call to action in this particular case with the podcast is to get people to sign up, to get you to sign up to the podcast using my bespoke email link, which is john@bcast.email. Now, this is a clever little email set up by the Bcast platform, which basically automatically puts you onto a mailing list, and it then makes sure that you're registered for the podcast on the podcast site. And it helps me to connect up to Email Octopus, and it helps me to build my list of podcast listeners. Now, Bcast happens to have an active connection with Email Octopus, but of course you can use others, and I use ActiveCampaign and I use MailChimp. You can connect them if you use a webhook, but if you want to use a webhook with Zapier, it means you need to have a paid account with Zapier. So just be aware of that. But you can basically have a call to action, which is click on this link and on the link below and join the email list, and maybe you can have a lead magnet as well, but we can look at that later. So the call to action needs to be embedded in the outro to the podcast. So you need to remind people what you want them to do. You may also consider, as I have done in creating a standard intro and outro, which also uses this call to action. Again, Bcast allows you to put these intros and outros at the beginning. So basically what I have is I have a little intro from Bcast, I then have the music, and then I get into the podcast, and it's all fairly slick, but it's all already created. And this is the whole point about having systems and processes. It makes it very easy to do it time and time again, because all I have to do is create this core content, and then I can knit the pieces together. So, does your podcast have a sponsor? Well, if you're starting up a new podcast, the answer is almost certainly no. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't create your own sponsorship slot and make use of it. Now, if you look at or go and listen to the Online Course Masters podcast, which is a great podcast by Phil Ebener and Jeremy Deegan, both of whom I know, they do it really well because Phil has got this Online Course Masters membership site, and halfway through in the mid-roll, he has a sponsorship slot which basically advertises his academy and his membership site. And you can do this for your own sponsor slot for one of your own primary calls to action and use it in every episode. And of course, you can also use a trackable link. In this case, I'm using a pretty link to monitor conversions too. So here's my mid-roll sponsor slot so that you can see how I do it.
This episode and all our episodes are sponsored by the 6 Minute Strategist Academy, the only place where you can find all my Academy courses to help you become a more effective and profitable digital entrepreneur. With nearly 40 courses covering digital marketing, entrepreneurship and course creation, it's the perfect place to discover how to grow your online business today. Visit jbdcolleague.com/free trial to join with a 7-day free trial to make sure it's perfect for your business.
Now, having put all this together, you can go ahead and think about recording your episode. But don't forget, you'll need a specific artwork for each episode, which I strongly recommend you do. Most podcast hosts enable you to embed these very easily. You can see the one for this episode on the screen at the moment. And if you're listening to the podcast, then you'll be able to see it in the podcast artwork. But let's go on. You are ready now to put your episode together, and you can do what I'm doing now, which is to sit down and record it. And congratulations, having done the recording, you've now got your podcast episode recorded. You've got your intro, your outro, and your mid-roll sponsor. So you're in good shape now to start moving ahead with the rest of the strategy. The next step that I take is to strip out the audio from the video. Now, this is very easy in ScreenFlow, and I'm sure it's the same in Camtasia. You simply export the audio only. I then take it into Audacity, the audio, and basically clean it up a little bit in Audacity. and of course then re-export it to a WAV file. Now when you're re-exporting it, you'll get an opportunity in Audacity and in most audio programs to complete the metadata. And it's very important that you do this, particularly for podcast platforms. And you can see how I've got it on the screen here. And you have to put in the artist name, the track title, the album title, the track number, the year, the genre, and any comments you want to add. But it is important that you get the metadata in. So in Audacity, I process the audio file. And what I do is very simple. I basically adjust the treble and the bass. I also do a noise reduction on it, and I go through and pick out any unwanted bumps and noises and breaths and things. It takes a few minutes, but it's well worth doing, particularly when people are listening to an audio file. I then export it in a WAV format, WAV, which I then bring into a piece of software called Bouncecast. Now, you don't have to do this, but it processes the audio another step and gives you a much warmer, richer tone, but it's automatic. You just put it in and then run it through Bouncecast. It takes about 2 minutes, and then I can export it. But this time, when I export it, because it's going to be my podcast recording, I export it to an MP3 file at 192 kilobytes per second. I do it in stereo, but mono is absolutely fine. This results in a smaller file, which is great for uploading. It's also great for your listeners when they download it or they listen to it, because it's much faster to stream. It's a much smaller file, and the quality is still absolutely fine for podcasting. So now I've got a video and an audio file, and that is the cornerstone of my podcast content. But I can now start to put my podcast and my content strategy into play, and I start with the podcast upload. Now, I'm using Bcast, although I use Libsyn for the online learning podcast. You can find links to all these platforms at the bottom. I'm also going to mention some apps in due course, and you can find links to those below as well. Some of these links, by the way, are affiliate links. If you do click on them, you won't pay more, but I may get a reward. And in doing that, you're supporting the work I'm doing on the podcast, and I really appreciate it. So I have to upload it, in this case, to Bcast. So I need to put in the show number and title. I need to put in the publishing date when I want it to go out. I'm trying to do an episode every week, but that's not always possible. But I'm trying to put the episodes out on Wednesdays, and I'm actually working on this on a Tuesday. So hopefully this one will go out tomorrow. I put in the show-specific artwork, the summary, the very brief summary explaining what's going on. I put in the detailed show notes, which I create from all the references, but I also take the outline words from the slide deck and put them into the show notes. You can also, using Bcast, generate a transcript, but I find these bullet point notes are probably more useful for people, and it does take a bit of tidying up, but it's quite easy to do. If I've got a guest, you can put in a guest notification. They'll get an email when the show goes live. Put in any keywords you want to add. Don't forget, I've talked to you about putting the metadata on the audio file when you export it from Audacity. That's very important. And basically, save it then as a draft until everything is completed and you're ready to start scheduling things to go live. Now, both Bcast and Libsyn start the syndication process for you, because they send your podcast to multiple channels, including places like Google Play, Spotify, Android, Blogger, SoundCloud, Tumblr, and even a blog page linked on your blog if you want to do that. And the great advantage of this is that you can widely disseminate your content. And you're doing that by just basically publishing the podcast. And a lot of that syndication happens for you, which is absolutely fantastic. Now you can upload your video to your YouTube channel. I take a thumbnail from the slide deck, normally the first slide. I've got hashtags already set up, which you can see on the screen here. I add it to 3 of my playlists, and I save it as a draft to come back to schedule later when I'm ready to get everything scheduling. So I've now got an audio ready to go on my podcast host, and I've got the video in YouTube. And that, believe it or not, is just the start. But already you've got so much potential content there. So what you've seen me do, and this is a diagram from my Funalytics tool, is to basically, I've got the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, and I've created the video content or the episode. I've uploaded it on the left to YouTube, and I've processed the audio, and I've got it onto the Bcast platform. But that's just the start. Now it's going to start to get really interesting, because what I want to do is to repurpose the podcast and the video content so I can share it to my main social accounts. Now, you can, of course, do this manually. I use an app called repurpose.io. There's a link below. And the reason I do this is very simple. It does all the reformatting of the video for you. And if you follow the steps, and I'm not going to give you a repurpose tutorial now, but if you follow the steps they recommend, you can create square videos, vertical videos, intros, outros, and it also pulls in the captions, which you actually use Facebook to create for you. So again, it's another process. But once you put the video, and this is another major reason for having the video, although you can do it with the podcast, the major reason for doing the video is that you can then use these tools to make your process much faster, much more efficient, but also systematically syndicate your content to a much wider audience. So speed is important, and of course time is money. So my main social channels are LinkedIn. I've got 2 groups on Facebook and my Facebook page. I've got a Twitter account. I've got an Instagram account and IGTV. I've got a Pinterest account. And of course, I've got a YouTube channel, which we've already spoken about. So I want to have the opportunity to share all this content, to let people know I've got this fantastic podcast episode, and give them a chance to come back and to watch the video or to listen to the audio and to sign up to the podcast. And that helps to grow my audience. Now here on the screen, you can see a couple of images to show you what the content looks like and how smart, clean, and clever it is when it creates this content. But what do we need to do now is to create a program of content which can be scheduled for these social channels, which also leads back to the podcast or to the video, and which has calls to action in it. And to do this, we're using Repurpose to create what they call snippets, which are short pieces of video, anything from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, basically which I create from the video, but which you can also create from the podcast. Please note, if you are going to use Repurpose.io, then they, at the moment, only integrate with Libsyn. So if you want to use your podcast with Repurpose.io, make sure you're hosting your podcast on Libsyn. So the next problem is the video formats for these different platforms differ, because on Twitter, Facebook groups, and LinkedIn, you need to have square videos, but the vertical format works better on Instagram and IGTV. So you have to create 2 different sets, but Repurpose does this for you, and that's particularly why I like it. You can also, as I've mentioned, you can use the functionality of Repurpose and Facebook to create these captions. And you can see at the bottom of these images, I've got captions, which is basically when you're looking on social media, often the default is not to have the sound on. So by showing people the captions, they can see what you're talking about. And that very often prompts them to turn the sound on. So what you have to do is upload your whole video to your Facebook page, which is connected to Repurpose, and basically go through the process of creating the captions and everything on your Facebook page. Once you've got that, you need to pick out some spots in the video which have got where you can find specific topics, and you can get the timestamp for those. Because you put those in the description, and they are used, and those timestamps are used to create the snippets which are going to create the video content for these social channels. Now, the outros you use for the social channels can either lead back to your YouTube video, or you can encourage people to listen to the podcast on the episode page, or you can get them to sign up to the podcast itself. And you can also create snippets and send them to Dropbox, which means you can download them and have them on your own image library, and you can then start to repurpose those for different purposes later on as well. Now, scheduling can be done directly through Repurpose. You can use apps like Buffer or Promo Republic, and I use Promo Republic. You can directly schedule in Facebook, and when you're scheduling for IGTV, you need to bring them into the Facebook Content Studio Creator, which is linked to your Instagram account, and you schedule them in there. All relatively quick to do. Of course, you can schedule on YouTube as well. Or you can use an asset organizing software like Airtable and schedule them through Airtable. Now, the great thing about Airtable is if you are a solo entrepreneur, you can sign up to Airtable and they'll give you a lot of the functionality in their creator plan for free. And later on, if you want to bring in your VA or what have you can, and then it'll move to a paid content. But they'll give you most of the functionality for free if you've just got the single account, and I find that particularly helpful. Now, of course, you can go further. Don't waste the opportunity to create a lead magnet to offer additional opportunities to grow your email list. So this slide deck, of course, is going to be particularly useful and valuable to you because it takes you through all the steps by step. So I've created a PDF from the slide deck, and I will make the download available in the show notes. Now I'm using Wishpond to create this page, but you can use Lead Pages or similar programs. Or you can just have some sort of sign up pop-up box and then send people an email telling them where they can go and download it. However you do it, use every asset you can to focus on your primary and secondary marketing goals, and offering people the opportunity and offering you the opportunity to get this slide deck, of course, is a wonderful opportunity to do that. Now, when designing my landing pages, and I'm really lifting the kimono here, I'm frankly not very good at design. So I created this landing page, which you can see on the screen, but then I used another app called Attention Insights, which shows me how people's eyeballs, it uses AI to identify the heat spots on the thing and to work out how effective your image is. And if this one actually scored quite highly, so I'm quite happy with it. So that's another little tool. You don't have to do this, but I'm trying to make this as helpful and as useful as I can for you. Now, a word about apps. All right, now you don't have to use them particularly if you can do what they can do. I'm not very good at some of those technical things, but they also speed up my process, and I have built what I call my app toolbox, mostly from AppSumo deals over time. And AppSumo is a great little site where they do deals with software apps, which are normally a monthly fee, and you can get them up normally for actually a very reasonable one-off fee. And if you build over time a little toolbox of these things, what I hate is having all these monthly fees, which cost, and at the end of the day, end up costing an awful lot of money going out all the time. So I normally pick up 1 or 2 AppSumo deals every month, and I've got this fantastic collection of assets in my toolbox, which help me to create all this content and to be a much more effective marketer of my content. But at the end of the day, it's entirely up to you. So don't please feel that I'm trying to force you to use these apps. I'm not. I want you to be aware of how I'm doing things. And if it helps you, that's great. And if you've got a better way of doing it, then please tell me about it, because I'd love to learn from you. So where have we got to? To summarize this strategy, we've created a podcast in audio and video format. But I've then been able to syndicate segments of this content to my principal social channels, scheduling them, and I schedule them like 1 a day over a week, so that I'm generating professional quality content, which helps my audience on these different platforms to engage. I'm hoping to educate them a little bit, but I'm hoping to build their interest and their engagement over time to multiply the impact that my podcast content has, and hopefully lead them back into my major calls to action, get them onto my email list, get them into my membership site, get them buying my Udemy courses, get them buying my Fiverr gigs, whatever it is. So you can see it is a very clear strategy. And once you've got this set up and ready to go, then it's far quicker to repeat the process time and time again than it is to try and do things on an ad hoc basis all the time. So I know exactly what I'm going to be doing next when I finish recording this video. And once you've got your system set up, however you want to set it up, then you will be able to do this too. It's absolutely straightforward. Once somebody explains to you the process, it opens your eyes to what is possible. And I hope that's what we've achieved in this episode today. So that's the end of the episode. I hope you found it really helpful. How to build your podcast content strategy into a multi-channel strategy which is going to engage and educate. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you very soon in the next episode of the Optimistic Entrepreneur Podcast.